on 90.3 WCPN Idea Stream. It's November 12th. You're with a virtual City Club Forum. For more than 9 years in a row now, Cuyahoga County's travel and tourism industry has logged record-setting growth rates in visitation, buoyed by new hotels, restaurants, the unveiling of the redesigned public square, and the securing of major events such as the Republican National Convention, the Major League Baseball All-Star Game, and the upcoming NFL Draft. The region's visitation increased at a faster pace in 2019 than did the rest of the nation. And then the coronavirus pandemic brought the world pretty much to a standstill. As cities locked down to stop the spread of the disease, travel evaporated. Here we are nearly 9 months later. The travel and tourism industry is one of, if not the hardest hit industry, with a whopping 36% of the country's travel losses. How can the travel and tourism industry survive until the pandemic subsides? What's that mean on a national, a regional, and a local scale? We have assembled today a group of local and national experts to answer these questions and many more. So I'm joined today by Nan Marchand-Beauvoir, the Senior Vice President of Membership and Industry Relations for the U.S. Travel Association, by David Gilbert, the President and CEO of Destination Cleveland, and by Adam Sachs, the President of Tourism Economics. As in every single City Club Forum, you can participate with your questions as well. Please text them. The number is 330-541-5794. It's on your screen, 330-541-5794. You can also tweet the messages to @TheCityClub, all one word, and we will certainly work those in. And with that, let us begin. Welcome to all the guests. Adam, you're my data guy. I'm going to start with you. What's the state of the industry around the U.S.? We think that we're hurting here in Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, but are we average? Are we better than some? What's the complete story?
Well, the story is that the industry has staged a modest recovery. When you go back to where we were in the spring, travel spending around the country was down over 80%. We never experienced anything like it. And then as we went through the summer, we began to see people travel again regionally, most people driving, not flying, but we saw some recovery. Where we are now is travel spending is still down about 45% relative to where it was last year. So by no means healed. About 50% of people are saying they don't feel comfortable traveling outside of their community right now. And Cleveland has performed really right in line with that. So very consistent with those national averages. And we expect when all is said and done, travel spending in Cleveland will have declined in the range of 50% for the year 2020.
That is a stunning number. David, 20 million people was our goal for 2020. Were we on target for that? Are we on target for that? Not anymore, but long term prior to COVID?
Yeah, Rick, we were. In fact, just a few weeks ago, we announced all of our metrics that we track year over year for 2019, and we were doing incredibly well. We had a 9th straight year where growth in the number of visits from a percentage basis was up over the national average. 8 out of 9 years up over the state average. Travel and tourism continued to be a growth industry for our region. And for every increase in people visiting, it increases the number of jobs, the amount of spending, the amount of taxes generated, and so many other great things that come with it. So we certainly were on track. About 5 years ago, we set a number of 20 million visits by 2020. And we had gone from 14 million to over 19.5 million. So we were very much on track to hit that target.
We talk about in the industry things like branding, giving Cleveland a reputation beyond just the convention planners, but with tourists as well. Nan, how important is it when outsiders think Cleveland that there's something for them to attach to that word?
It's critically important because there's every other city in the United States and also globally is trying to vie for that visitor's attention. And I think Cleveland brilliantly back in 2014, when you launched your new brand, you truly set the stage for being authentic to what your destination has to offer. The good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that authenticity is something that we know that travelers value. So that messaging, which is on brand, is really critical to a part of your success, I feel.
David, is there anybody we emulate? She gave us great props there for being one of the leaders. Is there someone we emulate, somewhere we look to say, that's a great idea, we could do that, it works for Northeast Ohio?
Well, one, Nan, thank you. I appreciate you saying that. We really are proud of feeling like we're right on target with that brand, and it's definitely worked. I think, Rick, when we looked at developing the brand, we really didn't have a place in mind. What we tried very, very hard to do, and it was through a year-long process of enormous amounts of research locally, regionally, nationally, at capturing the essence of who Cleveland is. And as Nan said, that's the good, the bad, and the ugly, but it's who we are. And a brand is really about a feeling you elicit. And we know that the people who that can relate to who we are and want to be part of that, they're coming. I think the other piece that was important is we have an aspiration of wanting to be sort of an it city, if you will. We look a lot in many ways at our regional competitors, Columbus and Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, and so on, in so many ways. But we also need to look at aspirationally. When we say an it city, it's one of those that when you say the name of a city, and whatever it stands for, you really get a positive impression. I think, Seattle's hit that, and Portland's hit that, and over the years, I'd say now Austin and Nashville are probably the top two in the country from my perspective. And I think part of it for us is we would like to get ourselves to be that it city of the Midwest from a perception standpoint, that when you think of Cleveland, it really conjures up an image that you're positive about.
Kind of interesting, when you started that sentence, the first two towns that came into my head were Seattle and Austin, and those are the ones you named. So clearly that means that they're doing something right. Nan, is that something that could work for every city? We can't all be it city.
You can't all be it, but you can definitely be authentic and really focus on what is different and what might resonate to visitors. The only other thing I would mention about being authentic is there is a state that has followed in your footprints, David, and that's Nebraska. They came out with a campaign about 18 months ago that's won them national acclaim, and it really followed in the footsteps of what you've done. Or you have a country like Bermuda, who kind of tongue-in-cheek uses the triangle within its branding and its marketing. So you just have to kind of find that niche or that thing that'll resonate. And to David's point, it's a very long and arduous process. It does take time, but when you land on it, you will reap the benefits of that.
Rick, I'd just like to add one other thing, because I think to Nan's point, it's right with Nebraska. It's also being proud of who you are and genuinely projecting that.
Embrace it.
Trying to be something you're not.
Exactly. Embrace it. That's very important.
That is important.
Embrace it unapologetically.
Adam, I know you focus on the intersection of the economy and the travel sector. Boil down for the layperson, what does that mean?
Well, I mean, there are a number of things that I could say about that. I think one of the pieces of information that's so important to understand is that the success of the Cleveland economy over the last decade has largely been tied to the success of the visitor economy. Employment within visitor-related industries in Cleveland over the last 10 years through 2019 grew at more than twice the rate of other industries in the Cleveland economy. And so now you're in a situation where 1 in 3 of all the job losses in Cleveland are related to the travel industry. So you put those two perspectives together and you get this very clear conclusion that the only way that the Cleveland economy becomes whole again and gets back to its prior peaks is through restoring the travel industry. There's no other way that the Cleveland economy gets back to where it was without the travel industry becoming fully restored. It's simply just been too important a factor in the success of Cleveland for Cleveland to regain its prior levels of economic activity without a restoration of the travel industry.
Before I ask David specifically, Adam, around the country, do people have targets for when they think jobs can return to some level of normalcy? And that's if we get rid of this thing in 6 months.
They do. We do a number of forecasting exercises for clients around the country. And the general theme that comes out of as we do the modeling of what happens with the virus, what happens with the economy, and then with travel behavior as a function of those two things, we expect travel volumes in the U.S. to get pretty much back to where they were by the end of 2023. Right. So the end of 2023, you could expect to see people traveling to the same degree in the U.S. as they were before the crisis. Now, this, keep in mind as far as the timeline of this is that, as you said, Rick, the next 6 months are going to be almost entirely defined by the pandemic. And so it's not until we get containment that's going to involve the rollout of a vaccine and mitigating efforts until we get people free to travel, right? And so we're kind of circling on our calendars the second half of next year as being when we see pent-up demand emerge, where people are able to travel more freely, more confidently. At that point, then we're dealing with the residual effects of a recession that has indeed been quite severe. And so that's why, even though we start to see people travel, in significant numbers, the second half of next year, it'll then take another couple of years before we get back to prior peaks, because we still have unemployment, about 10 million people unemployed in the U.S. And absent additional fiscal stimulus, household income is going to start falling in the next couple of months. So these are real headwinds that the industry is going to be facing for the next couple of years, even as we emerge out of the crisis proper.
David, you concur?
I do, and we certainly follow the expertise of Adam and others around the country. They are the experts in this. I think our goal is whatever the experts are saying in terms of when this industry nationally would be out of it. Our goal is to try to get there sooner. I mean, that needs to be our goal. It's level setting across the country, and we need to target our efforts so that when we are out of it, we can accelerate as fast as we can. So again, knowing especially how important it is to our region that we get back as fast as we can.
And the only thing that I would add to that briefly is, given the size and the scope and the importance of our industry, how many people are employed in our industry, getting our industry whole, getting us back up and running is a great way to help get the American economy back in shape. It's really would be helpful if, and when we can travel, we can accelerate that. That'll help the economy overall, nationally.
Even in times like this, Nan, how critical is the advocacy work? I imagine there's no off season for trying to get people to realize that A, tourism as a whole helps the country, and B, tourism in specific areas helps those areas.
There's never an off season for advocating on behalf of the industry. And I think the one thing that COVID has shown us, and also has shown our elected officials, is the importance and the economic impact that we have for this country and globally anyway. So no, it's a 24/7 effort. And we have an amazing government affairs and advocacy team, and they are nonstop working on behalf of this industry. So yeah.
Go ahead.
The good news is that COVID has we had a seat at the table, but I think given the economic impact that we're facing now as a country, they realize the importance of getting this tourism economy back as quickly as possible.
Hey, David, Adam talked about the idea that there's this pent-up demand out there. People want to know that where they're going is safe. How important is that going to be in the messaging that we send out to people, that this is a safe place to be? Maybe you can't say you're safer than Columbus or safer than Austin, but we got to be safe to attract people.
Yeah, it's critical. And interestingly, if you go back pre-COVID, the thought of promoting yourselves as a safe destination really wasn't even on the radar. It wasn't really any significant part of people's factors of where they chose to travel, where now it's number one. And we started our Clean Committed program, working with Cleveland Clinic, Metro Health, University Hospitals. We've setting a set of standards. We have well over 700 businesses that have signed up, are promoting it online. So our locals and visitors have a place to go to look who has pledged to be Clean Committed. We've distributed, along with the county together, over 200,000 free safety kits through those businesses and other places, and are going to continue to do so. So we've really tried to gear up to make sure that we could do everything in our power to project that this community is working together to help ensure the safety of visitors. And certainly we also have to acknowledge that it's a personal choice. We aren't trying to push people beyond their comfort zone, but recognizing that for people who are open to being out in social situations, in whatever way, we can promote the safest places for them to go.
The one thing that I would add to that also is in the summer, when we did see travel patterns, we noticed that people were traveling to areas that were deemed safe or perceived as being safe, like beach communities had pretty decent summers, as well as the national parks. Any type of outdoor activity, if a consumer could travel to a place that was outdoors, we saw that those destinations, those cities that offered those type of activities had stronger seasons than a city. But absolutely promoting safety and what you can do and what's open and how you need to engage within that community is definitely number one factor as people look to travel.
So then does Destination Cleveland say, wait a minute, we've got a national park one county away. We've got this huge metro park system here. Do you start pushing that a little bit more than maybe you'd pushed it in the past?
Yeah, we actually have done that. And our recent campaigns, which have been focused locally, as well as now starting a little bit regionally, have done exactly that, Rick. We've started a number of passports, and giving people checklists of places to go and things that are perceived as safer, and outdoor activities. And thankfully, for a metro area, we're really fortunate to have probably some of the best infrastructure in the country. One of the largest metro park systems, largest and developed, plus a national park really attached to our city. So it has been helpful to be able to promote a lot of that, and it is a plus for us for sure.
Adam, I see people doing things like going to a national park, but that's not going to churn the kind of money into our economy that some other things might have. Are there ways that we need to think about doing things differently that'll bring cash to Cleveland or to wherever?
Yeah, a lot of that's going to come down to implementing safety protocol that allows people to engage in those more lucrative activities. So, what can be done to ensure that restaurants can continue to stay open and at as much capacity as is safe. The same would be true of attractions. So, museums and aquariums, zoos, these sorts of attractions, ensuring that they stay safe, theme parks. So these things matter. And then the other piece, of course, that matters a lot in terms of economic impact is the meetings and conventions side. And it's the one area that has been the hardest hit of the entire travel economy in the US. Meetings and conventions have come to a virtual standstill. The meetings that have come back are relatively small in size. So establishing guidelines within which meetings and conventions and trade shows can begin to take place again will be essential if we're going to get the revenue back to the industry. And that really matters for cities around the country, Cleveland included.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Rick, I'd like to add something to that because I think it brings up such a good point that one of the things that hasn't stopped is business development, and particularly in that group side. We were awarded a couple of weeks ago 8 future NCAA championships. We are still booking meetings and conventions. The pipeline has now started to open up where meeting convention owners associations are now starting to begin and look at 22, 23, 24 and beyond. And we're spending a lot of time trying to load that up so that when we're out of COVID, our pipeline of future groups is as strong as.
That was going to be my very next
The one thing I would add to,
Go ahead.
sorry, the last thing I would add to that about the meeting space is that U.S. Travel with the Meetings Means Business Coalition understands the need to get the meetings and business events economy back up. And we are launching the Let's Meet There campaign sometime in Q1. I mean, the timing is a little flexible, but the whole purpose of launching that campaign is to focus on meeting safely. We'll have websites, we'll have toolkits, we'll have messaging, and we actually will have a repository of meetings that have taken place where you can visually take a look at those meetings, find out some information. But it's all about meeting safely and making sure that people understand that even during COVID, you can meet safely as long as the protocols are followed.
And that's the message you're going to take nationwide.
Correct. We're going to be doing that, pushing that out nationwide.
David, you just mentioned the NCAA. I was going to say we are fortunate to have so many things already on the books here, a lot of them courtesy of the NCAA, but it's not all about sports. How has the work of the past few years in attracting people to Northeast Ohio kind of helped to insulate Northeast Ohio from a bleaker future?
Well, I think if you look at this as sort of a level setting event, and as Adam mentioned, the difficulty and the drop off in travel is probably about right on par in Cleveland percentage wise as it's been nationally. So then you get to what's the place from which you're starting? Where's our foundation? And we built a very strong foundation. And when you in a matter of 7 years go from 14 million visits a year to 20, that's a significant increase. So if we're going to be off, we're starting from a better place. And we keep reminding ourselves that this is not a Cleveland problem. This is a national, global issue, and we need to be ready when we're on the other side of this to come out of the blocks as fast as we can. Thankfully, we're going to be starting from a much better place than we might have been 6, 7, 8 years ago.
Adam, are there specific areas of opportunity the industry should be looking into that maybe we hadn't thought about pre-COVID? You mentioned safety. What else is out there that suddenly we're saying this matters?
Mm-hmm. Well, where our visitors come from is completely reshuffled right now. And it's likely that we'll see that through the majority of 2021. So it has some pretty important implications for marketing strategy. Right now, 1 in 3 respondents to a recent survey are saying they're switching from a fly trip to a drive trip. So it means that visitors are now traveling and expect to be traveling into the near future regionally instead of cross country. So that has a big implication on where we market, right? And so where Cleveland's visitors are going to come from in the near term anyway, is going to be from a closer ring than it was. So that's one change. Another change is that there's virtually no international travel happening right now, either in or out. But the fact is, if you look at 2019, there were 19 million more outbound trips by US residents than there were inbound trips by international visitors. What that means is that if you are able to convert those would-be outbound international travelers of US residents, you actually can more than compensate for those visitor losses in terms of inbound, at least on a volume of people basis. Right? They don't spend as much as international visitors, but that's another opportunity as far as focus and where we expect to see a silver lining. And that's going to continue through the majority of 2021. I think when we do see that rebound in the second half of the year, it's going to be largely experienced in the domestic market. And so that also becomes a major opportunity and where we're going to see the growth.
You say people domestically don't spend as much. Is that because somebody coming here from Paris might spend 7 or 8 days, somebody coming from Portland might spend 4, or what accounts for the difference?
It is that length of stay is a factor, but also the behavior while they're here. So international visitors shop a lot more than domestic travelers. They also tend to stay in nicer hotels and in paid accommodation as well. And then when an international travel comes from overseas, they often will stay. They will visit several states. So there's actually not only that length of stay, but the transportation that it takes to get from one state to another, and the spending just continues to ratchet up. And the average spending of an international overseas visitor in the U.S. is over $3,000.
Nan, I was kind of wondering, had we ever, prior to COVID, looked at what happens when the gravy train stops? I mean, a lot of places built their economies thinking, I've got tourism, that's coming, that's growing, that's booming. Had we ever looked at something like a sudden halt before?
A day without tourism. Unfortunately, we have experienced it before. 9/11, we experienced it. SARS, we experienced it. But the one thing that we have learned is we know the importance of this economy, this tourism economy, and it's vital to the U.S. And not only from an economic standpoint, but when you do have people traveling and visiting, there's greater understanding of culture, even within the United States. I mean, being from Southern California, moving to the new Northeast, you could say it's a different culture. So having that understanding, having that exchange, it's just critical.
And yes, we have experienced crises before. I mean, travel is very susceptible to these sorts of disasters, whether it be a hurricane regionally or social unrest in a city or a terrorist incident. But one thing that's been remarkable is how resilient travel is. With each of these crises that's faced the industry, it has always come back. There has been no incident that has loomed so large that travel hasn't been fully restored and then grown additionally. So while these crises do present themselves over time, none of it changes kind of the prevailing reality that travel does continue to grow over time and continues to, over the last 40 years, grow faster than the rest of the economy, notwithstanding those crises.
And I would add, travel is about experiences and it's about interactions. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing COVID is showing us is that when we're as a people, when we're deprived of that, we crave it. And that's why I'm very hopeful that when we are on the other side of this, people are going to potentially flock back to the extent that they feel comfortable, but people are missing those interactions and those experiences that make their lives better.
Yeah,
yeah, definitely.
It's interesting.
No, I'm sorry.
We're all veterans of this industry to one degree or another. Over the last 25 years, I have seen and heard multiple times industry pundits or would-be pundits, predict that the industry would never come back. And none of those predictions has aged well. It's always come back. And so, as Mark Twain said, the rumors of my death have been greatly exaggerated. The same is true right now of the travel industry. And it is down, but certainly not out.
Go ahead, Nan.
No, and we know there's pent up demand. We launched a campaign called Let's Go There back in October. And the whole purpose of that campaign was to give people the permission to dream about traveling again when it was safer to do so, when there was more confidence to do so. And the results of that campaign has been phenomenal. And when you look at the website, the traffic on the website and the social interaction that's been engaged around that, people definitely, that pent up demand is there. And when they can, they will be doing it. That's why this industry is so resilient, because it's part of like your national right to travel. It's such a big part of our lives. I can't conceive of a life without travel. Personally.
Let me tell the audience in a few moments, we're going to be turning to your questions. If you have questions for our panelists, the number to text them is 330-541-5794. 330-541-5794. Also, you can tweet those questions to @TheCityClub, and we'll try and work all of your questions in. I do have some already, but please go ahead and send them. David, you just used the word comfortable. I'm going to reveal that I left Cleveland, I think twice now since this has all started. But on one of those trips, I went to New York City. We happened to be there the day the Metropolitan Museum of Art reopened. I was terrified. Even though the numbers of people were down, there were folks everywhere, and you could see that everyone was terrified to be that close to people again. How do we get around that? Not to throw shade on the Met, but how do you get around that?
I think time is the answer. When Adam mentioned that there are factors. I mean, think about if the question was if there is a good medical response to COVID 6 months from now, it's still going to be 3 years until we see a recovery, and that is in part because of unemployment and the recession that we were in. But the other part is that mentally, it still would take time. I think if you go back to 9/11, it took the airline industry took a few years to get back to where they were, in part because it took some people just some time mentally to feel comfortable getting back on a plane, even if there was no evidence to show that shouldn't have been the case. So I think it'll just be time that a pre-COVID world or post-COVID world rather will adjust to people's feelings of safety in traveling and being close to other people.
Okay, adjust is a good word. Let's go ahead and start taking some questions now. Again, the number will be up on your screen. You can text them in. And David, we knew this first one was coming. I think we all could have guessed this. Will Cleveland be able to host the NFL draft in April, or will it be virtual? What kind of economic impact will that have on the city if we lose that show?
Well, it's a great question. In fact, we had a great long meeting this morning with the NFL and our team and lots of partners around town. Have been meeting with the NFL multiple times a week. Right now, the NFL draft is being planned as a very large, free, and in-person event down at our lakefront the last weekend in April. Right now, it is going to continue to be planned that way, but socially distanced, planned so in a socially distanced way until the COVID world tells us otherwise. It will not be, if anyone remembers what was on TV in Nashville, the last live draft, it's become an incredible event. 100,000 plus people every day in one place, in one time, shoulder to shoulder. It will not be that. No matter what, it will be time ticketing. It will be a space that's enclosed, so only so many people can be in at one time. But I will tell you, what the NFL is planning in Cleveland is really incredible. And I think all of us, have the highest of hopes that it will take place in person, because it will make Cleveland shine, not just in front of tens of millions of people nationally and internationally on television, but for hopefully tens and tens of thousands of people on a large footprint over the course of 3 days, live and in person.
At the same time, though, to get to the back half of that question, it's going to cost us some money because we can't be what Nashville was last time out, right?
Well, I think it depends. I mean, in terms of it costs money in terms of opportunity costs. I mean, it was Nashville when they did their economic impact studies. The event had direct spending of well over $100 million, an incredible number. And it won't be that in Cleveland. But depending on the size and scale, it could very well be some significant percentage of that, and that's still very much our hope. But what happens, over the next 5.5 to 6 months, which is the time frame we're looking at in terms of our country's response to COVID and where we are right now is anybody's guess. But certainly we're planning for something very large and exciting, and but also keeping a very close eye on a daily basis of what the COVID world tells us.
Nan, should cities, specifically Cleveland, even be trying to attract events that are that large, a political convention, an NFL draft, or should we now start looking at different strategies, kind of assuming folks will be reticent to gather in large groups?
Well, I think cities are obviously, they have to be following their regional, city, and state guidelines for meetings, but I think you do have to continue to market. And you're going to pivot to smaller events and meetings based on what the regulations are, but you the time frame, the lead up time to larger events are multiple years out. So you still have to be in that game to market. And I think it's really important we spoke about this before, but even more so in the meetings and business events environment. I mean, a business event is a controlled environment. So you can guarantee that there are protocols in place that you can meet safely. And there are a lot of guidelines currently out there and certifications for safe gatherings that are in place. So short term, you might be looking at smaller business meetings, but long term, you have to be out there still pursuing those larger business events.
Okay.
I'd add, Rick, one thing that Nan had mentioned earlier. We're also talking, we have a customer advisory board, and we're getting a lot of input of what meeting planners are envisioning for the future. So we can position ourselves for what, if meetings are going to look a little different in the future than they might pre-COVID, what does that mean for us, and how do we adjust with our physical spaces? How do we adjust our marketing? How do we adjust with our community's offerings to try to meet the demand of what the industry will be calling for in future years?
Okay. I love it when the questioner prefaces it with, not sure the panel can answer. Let's go ahead and try. And I'll go to Adam for this first part. I wanted to know if airlines are already starting to adjust their offerings because they know that people don't want to travel as much.
Well, I mean, the airlines have made huge adjustments, primarily by significantly reducing the number of flights and routes that they have in operation. So the latest data shows that air travel is operating at about a third of last year's levels. So only 1 in 3 passengers relative to last year. The offering itself, the way that it's changed for those flights that are still operating, is some really impressive safety protocol. I have really been impressed with what the airlines have done, and the evidence is that air travel is extremely safe because of how the air is recycled and filtered, and the way that the planes are being cleaned, and the protocol for touchless access to the flights. So all of that, I think, bodes really well for how the airlines have done an excellent job at trying to engender confidence in air travelers, but the reality is, I don't think that we're going to see air travel take off, if I can use the pun there, in the near term. Just as cases continue to rise, people are going to be reluctant to travel. But indeed, I think the airlines have done a really good.
Well, let me put you on the spot. Have you flown, and were you comfortable?
I've flown multiple times, and I've been very comfortable. And I'm flying again on Monday. So for whatever that's worth.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure. David, the second half of this question I want to kind of throw at you because it's specific to Cleveland Hopkins. Wanted to know, because we're not a hub for any airline, could we lose additional flights and carriers as people cease to fly as much as they did? Or are you concerned?
I don't have every specific all the flights that have been scaled back at Hopkins, but I think it's very much a national trend. I believe it really has nothing to do with the hub. And in fact, if you look, there were just over the last several months numerous flights added to Hopkins, particularly for down to Florida as seasonality has started. United added a number of flights back, Frontier, Spirit, and others. So I think what really matters most from the airline standpoint is, can they fill planes from people going from point A to point B? And at the point that they determine they can, and they're able in doing so, they will be adding those flights back around the country, including at Hopkins.
330-541-5794, the number to text your question. Nan, why don't you take this one? Wanted to know if you think we'll see a difference between local travel predicated on day or weekend, or more local experiences, longer based plane vacations. Which one do you think people will return to first? I
think people are going to travel locally first. They're going to start venturing out within their own communities and they're gonna the road trip is definitely back. In fact, Adam, you may have this particular statistic, but I think the average road trip was under 300 miles pre-COVID, or maybe less, and now it's even longer. So people are willing to take longer trips in their cars so that they can go out and travel. So that's the first thing that's coming back, and we've seen that already.
And this bodes well for Cleveland because our bread and butter are, we're a regional drive destination. We're not, there aren't as many people from Salt Lake City thinking, should I fly to Cleveland for the weekend? But within a 500-mile radius, that's where we tend to really draw from. So as what Nan talked about, and research is showing that that's what's going to come back first, we think we're actually well positioned for that.
Yeah. We are not a hub for an airline, but we're kind of a hub for regional. We think Buffalo, Detroit, Indianapolis, Columbus, Pittsburgh. We are right there. Is that your target audience, David?
It is. In fact, the first bit of, for 6 months, we did no outbound marketing and advertising. People weren't traveling. Certainly our budget has been far less. And we just recently started a little bit back, and it's been in that regional area, particularly from Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Ohio.
Okay. Adam, let me throw this one at you. It says Cleveland's convention business was growing pre-COVID. What does the panel think is the future of the convention industry now? Will they move to more virtual conventions rather than at-large or in-large person gatherings? What's that mean for Cleveland as the back half of that? But for the industry, what's that mean?
Well, the hybrid model of meetings is likely going to be with us through a good part of 2021, because even as meetings start to take place, there are going to be some people that feel reluctant to participate in person. So that both in-person and virtual experience and integrating those is something that we expect to see throughout 2021. The longer term view beyond that, we expect that hybrid model, maybe to continue to endure, but for a stronger recovery of in-person. The reality is that the value of in-person meeting is far greater than virtual meetings. We have done significant research that's shown this. The U.S. Travel Association has done significant research that has shown this. The value of building partnerships, building knowledge bases, human capital, sales, all of these things, there's no substitute for face-to-face. And so that value proposition of face-to-face is going to prevail in the longer term. And you see that in, David, you were mentioning the sales pipeline for future events. We're hearing that from clients all over the country, that meeting organizers, they are undeterred. They see significant demand down the pike, and they are booking future events for 2022, 2023, 24, and even beyond.
The one thing that I would add to that, I was at the Meetings Professional International in Grapevine last week. I actually went to that annual conference, and there were 600 meeting attendees, primarily meeting planners attended live, and over 1,000 attended online. So the hybrid meeting is really strong, and it was really incredibly reassuring to see the protocols that were put in place to make sure that delegates were comfortable, and also the duty of care of the individual, the responsibility of the individual to make sure that they were following the protocols, that they took the daily COVID tests and got their temperatures checked. And there was a doctor's office on site at the convention that if you felt that you wanted to go in, you can get a rapid COVID test on site. So the meetings and business events industry, there is no question, as Adam said, it is a face-to-face business. That's when it's at its best. But the technology that has enabled hybrid meetings and everything else has really helped to let meetings continue during this difficult time. So it's really critical, and we'll be there.
Okay. David, one of the things that we know about Cleveland is the growing foodie scene here. We've become one of the major cities for foods in the country, like in New Orleans or like in New York. A question came in, as many restaurants close, and certainly the governor threatened that we could lose more next week. We may see more close. How does that affect our marketing as a foodie town? Can the restaurant industry, they ask, rebuild in Cleveland?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rick, and it's one that Cleveland and quite frankly everywhere across the country are facing. The fast fresh restaurant market, fast food, doing great during COVID. In fact, are up during COVID. But the full service restaurants, especially the smaller independent restaurateurs, they're getting killed. And COVID has affected them in a big way. I don't remember the statistics exactly, but the number of independent restaurants that have closed and are predicted to close across the country, including Cleveland, is very disheartening. I think there's a couple responses to it. For us, one of the things we're doing is really while we are keeping an eye on and planning what we're going to do from a long-term coming out of this, from a marketing programmatic and standpoint, we're also doing the same really for the first time locally, particularly as it relates to restaurants and hotels to some degree. And we're going to be launching some things over the next couple of weeks, specifically geared to trying to do everything we can to help boost business to restaurants during the winter months. I think surviving this next 6 months, 4 to 6 months during the winter in COVID is going to be key. So many restaurants were able to survive because of outdoor seating, in particular, that is going to be really challenging for anyone in a cold weather climate. I think for long-term marketing, a lot will still survive. And ultimately, I think it's a little bit like a forest fire or the pruning of a tree, that when it does happen, as sad as it is, we are going to see new things grow. And we've shown that we have a town and a thriving visitor economy that boosts those types of businesses. And I think we will see a lot of rebirth and regrowth and hopefully some great new products that will come out of the back end of COVID.
And if folks aren't familiar with the term ghost restaurants, we're seeing more of that pop up in ways that will help. Adam, nationally, is the scene the way he described it here? Are we seeing restaurants that know they're going to die, but know they can grow another way?
Well, the restaurant market is, I think, one of the key industries that highlights how much we need additional fiscal stimulus. Because fiscal stimulus is absolutely essential to keep restaurants in business, and so that flow both to households and households, but also to businesses. Whether it's another round of loans, forgivable loans, or other support. The restaurant industry, primarily small enterprises. These small businesses don't have capital that they can use to get themselves through a prolonged downturn. They've already been stretched to the limit. I agree with David. On the other side of this, out of all of this disruption, there's going to be businesses. But I think that it's paramount right now that policymakers take seriously what's at stake. And how much fiscal stimulus is required for the restaurant industry, for hotels, and for attractions as well.
Okay, thanks. Apologize for a little bit of shaky sound there. We'll work on that. Had an interesting note come in here. It says, good day. We're a small business who's partnered with Lake Erie Shores and Islands for 4 years. They operate a tourism-reliant company. They were thanking all of you for supporting communities, but they wanted to know, what can we do as a community in Sandusky? And for those of you who are local, lake resort town about 40 miles west of Cleveland. What can a place like that do to kind of follow Cleveland's lead and be supported by the folks who are here? David, any thoughts?
Well, one, I'd say that Lake Erie Shores and Islands actually has a terrific Convention and Visitors Bureau. They cross 2 counties. They do actually a tremendous job. We do a lot of partnering with them. Mm-hmm. It's certainly a part of our state that is a tourism hotbed. And I think one wonderful thing about so many of the attractions up there is that they are outdoor based. Whether you're Cedar Point, all the attractions in the islands, and a lot of the great communities along the shore of Lake Erie up there. I think winter's going to be tough. Winter's going to be tough for so many of our businesses throughout Northeast Ohio that depend on outdoor activities, because indoor activities are going to be more limited. I think, what Adam talked about, additional stimulus is key for those types of small businesses. And it's just hanging on through this winter until the spring, when hopefully, medically we start to get real light at the end of the tunnel, and far more outdoor activities can start to occur again.
Mhm. Nan, talk to me about places like a Sandusky, a place that's not sitting in the big city, but still uses and depends upon tourism. Are they faring worse, better, even?
I have said this before and I'll say it again. I think COVID has been the great equalizer. I think everybody is hurting. I think it's leveled the playing field, whether cities are devastated by this impact. But one of the things I'd recommend for Sandusky and smaller cities as well is to just, take a look at your product, look within your own boundaries, look at your residents as a source of business, and local drive and partnerships are critical. You may not have partnered with a neighboring city, but go ahead and see what you can do. There's more strengths together in times of diversity than not, but also looking into your own residents and see what kind of programs you can possibly develop for them is something worth considering.
Okay. Got a question that kind of almost ties into that, Nan. It says, what role do you see for small museums? What resources are available for those tiny places? Because we think about the Cleveland Museum of Art or the Natural History Museum or the Rock Hall. But we also have a little firefighters museum you can't get more than 12, 14 people into. How do those folks go forward?
Well, I think, being compliant with what the rules are for, the protocols are for safety, showcasing the fact that you can visit your museum safely, depending on what the numbers are. And again, partnerships and kind of thinking outside of the box of what you can do that's different based on what your product is. Just anything that we've traditionally done, we can't depend on anymore, because there is nothing traditional or safe about COVID. So we just have to think a little differently and be willing to take a risk. May not work, but you don't know if you don't try something different.
Mm-hmm. Adam, what do you think? As you study the numbers, are the smaller places surviving less well than the bigger places that do have an endowment?
Yeah, smaller places are going out of business. It is that stark. And PPP loans got through the first phase. Right now, there's no safety net for what we're entering into right now. So again, that's another critical need for support. Larger hotels, larger attractions. It depends on how you measure it. They laid off significant numbers of staff. But the institution itself, it still exists with just management level staffing. And there's all sorts of things going on with restructuring loans for these properties, because banks aren't getting paid as a result. But those institutions, those businesses will still be there on the other side. They have the ability to negotiate with banks because of their size. A small business doesn't. And small business, the proprietor depends on the income for their livelihood. And so that's where you see the fragility of these smaller businesses relative to larger ones.
Okay. Got a couple more minutes if you want to text in a few more questions, but one that came in, Nan, wanted to kind of know what the new normal might look like. Do we have any way of projecting? COVID is so fickle. We don't know where it's going to go, but what are we thinking right now? We have to have some plan.
I honestly don't know what the new normal is going to look like. I think it's the now normal. I mean, we're living it every day. I think the one thing that's critical is that consumers need to be confident. They need to have that sense of confidence that they can travel and that they can do it safety. That safety message, I think, is not going to go away even post COVID. I think that's going to be forefront in people's minds about how they can travel safely. That's going to be something that you're going to think about first. I think some of the protocols that have been put in place, especially in airlines, on the planes, cruise lines when they come back. I think those are going to stay for the foreseeable future. So no crystal ball, but I do think some of the protocols that have been put in place as it relates to safety will continue on for the foreseeable future.
Well, and Rick, I would add, I mean, it's interesting, if you look at air travel prior to 9/11 and after, it is absolutely night and day. If you had somebody who didn't know what travel was like prior, you went back in time, they wouldn't believe that you could, go under a quick metal detector. You could walk your friend, meet your friends right at the gate. I mean, it was a different world. But yet we figured out how to get back to a very normal industry, just with different protocols. And ultimately, one way or another, the same will happen. We will get back to a normal that's going to allow everybody to travel and to do the things they want to do. But there will likely be some future protocols that in time will just feel very normal to us.
Mm-hmm. David, question came in that really kind of impacts me too, because I'm sitting here. They wanted to know, what do we do to bring Playhouse Square back?
Well, one thing I could tell you is they have an incredible team there. I know Gina Bernasi and her whole team are doing everything they can. One of the difficult parts of Playhouse Square is they are dictated by what the state and the city are mandating, and it's not a bad thing, but so much is beyond their specific control. But what I think we all hope, because Playhouse Square is such a treasure, that as soon as time allows, and as soon as regulations allow, they're going to be back, and they're going to figure out a way to be back, that it'll continue to be the gem that it is. I wish I knew exactly, and I don't know if they know exactly, because COVID is still ongoing, but I have every confidence that their team is going to make absolutely the most out of whatever the recovery brings.
Yeah, I'm still holding on to some of my tickets from last year as well. You touched on the idea there of being mandated by the state, and we didn't really go there earlier when we mentioned the governor, but he did have that big speech last night. He did put things into place. I wonder how often Destination Cleveland or the Sports Commission contacts Columbus to see what are they going to allow you to do? What can we push back on?
We're actually very engaged. We're engaged on multiple levels. I was part of one of the governor's task forces related to how the state would respond to large sporting events and to meetings and conventions. We are part of a number of state associations that lobby regularly, and we do get very engaged. I will say, I feel bad for the governor, quite frankly. I think they're in a tough spot, because on one hand, the business interruption is key. We see it every day with with restaurants, hotels, attractions. On the other hand, you have a very real health and safety issue for residents, and keeping in mind the long-term future of our economy. So I think, sadly, I don't think there is a right answer. We're doing our best to add our voice and our contacts to in terms of the industry. But I also believe that the governor has a very tough job every day in dealing with this.
Okay. Nan, I'll give you the last word today. Should we be optimistic?
Absolutely. The glass is half full. We'll get past this. And as David and Adam has said, this industry has always come back stronger. Absolutely.
Absolutely. We'll leave it there. Thank you all for joining us for today's forum on the future of travel and tourism in Cleveland. We've been talking with Nan Marchand-Beauvois, the Senior Vice President of Membership and Industry Relations for the U.S. Travel Association, David Gilbert, President and CEO of Destination Cleveland, and Adam Sachs, President of Tourism Economics. Thank you all for being there. This forum was presented in partnership with Destination Cleveland. We do appreciate their support. All City Club virtual forums are sponsored by Bank of America, the Cleveland Foundation, Eaton, the George Gund Foundation, KeyBank, Nordson, the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, and PNC, and the many more generous members, sponsors, and donors listed on the website at cityclub.org/thank you. You can join them in supporting this work when you make a contribution online or become a member at cityclub.org. I'm Rick Jackson of IdeaStream. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our forum is now adjourned.